Welcome everyone. Today we'll have a massive Path of Exile 2 news digest. So in this video, we'll go through a summary notes that I have made over 7 pages of the latest developers interview with Zizaran and also with Jonathan Rogers. There's a lot of information that was revealed, massive things that you might want to know and you don't want to miss out. So over here, I try to summarize the 1 hour and also 40-minute video into a much shorter video for this one. And if you guys want to watch the previous video with the interview, we have the timestamp available. If you come over to the notes, you can see each part. If you want to listen to more details, you can come to the exact timestamp. And big thank you for Zesty Lemon for making those timestamps. And at the same time, we do have official news of the pre-download for Path of Exile 2. So let's dive into this, and then we'll go over 56 of questions and also answers related to the game, which are some really big reveals. So firstly, guys, we can start downloading the game about 1 day before the release of the game, and this is for PC. If you notice the times difference over here, this is the time around my time zone, and over here you can see the time zones will be adjusted when you click this web page, which is actually very good. For consoles, the Xbox players would have already pre-downloaded, and also PS players should have around 24 hours. So for the PC players, we have about 18 hours before the game starts to pre-download the game. And this is the big important things, to pre-download over 100 gig of the game. And the reason they're delaying the pre-download is to avoid data minus, as you're going to see in the question and also answers. So coming over to a summary notes of the latest interview with the developers. The first question asked was that will there be a leak that interact with the collective player experience and also progress? The example Zizaran gave was that if players was to kill about 4 million monsters, would this happen to the league or something changes? Now Jonathan over here answered that with Path of Exile 1 this was considered, but the developers didn't want players to wake up on different time zones in the middle of the night to do a league mechanic, and also felt left out and also unfair if they were to miss this particular league. So currently there's no league mechanic that will interact and also respond to the massive group of players that is doing the league at the moment. The second question we have is going to be about stash tabs. Now the question is that in Path of Exile 1, there's a lot of special unique stash tabs for the content of a particular league. The example here was the Blight tabs in Path of Exile 1, and because we don't have those league in Path of Exile 2, what's going to happen with those purchased items back in Path of Exile 1, which is supposedly to be transferred to Path of Exile 2? The answer over here is that the developers were looking to add in those potential leaks in the future, and if they're not planning to add those leaks, the developers will provide the players with some form of compensation in terms of a replacement, maybe a premium tab. Now we also have another question about merging normal tabs and also into crowd stash tabs. And the answer over here is that the developer Jonathan is not a big fan of crowd tabs because he thinks this makes the items look less appealing, they're too small, they're not attractive. So right now there's no ways to merge normal tabs into crowd stash tabs, even if you have bought over 100 like Zizaran is over here. Now one of the bigger questions was that will we be getting a target dummy for Path of Exile 2? Now at the moment it doesn't seem that we're getting a target dummy because Jonathan thinks it can be too complicated and similar damage testing can be done just doing the bosses or different mode, but this is something that can be considered if we have a target dummy with no major stat changes or something that's simplified. One of the reasons to not have a target dummy they were discussing is that we already have Path of Builders and we don't want to make it too competitive to players, or without armor and also resistance on the target dummy, the numbers that you see on the target dummy can be misleading in building a build. But that said, it is possible we can get a simplified target dummy in the future for Path of Exile 2. Now next question is related to portaling in and also out of boss fight. Because we know the boss fight in Path of Exile 2 will be very difficult, so the question is, can we portal out of boss fight? Can we pause the game? Can we log out of the game to avoid the boss fight? So at the moment, with the developer's perspective, it is intentionally designed that we cannot portal out of boss fight. So this is to avoid bugs and also abuses and also ways to kind of cheat the game. And you cannot swap your gears and also item during a boss fight as well. So those are intentionally designed so that you cannot kind of cheat the system. Now the follow-up question is that for hardcore players, can they actually avoid dying to the boss after realizing they can't beat the boss and maybe try to log out? So Jonathan answered over here that it is possible for hardcore players to log out and also come back to the checkpoint. And you can be doing this by pressing escape, pausing the game, and then respawn at a checkpoint location. Now that said, this particular feature can be abusable because this can allow players to dodge the boss's one-shot mechanics after realizing they can't dodge this. So the developers decided to go this way to be more player-friendly instead to make things difficult for the players. Jonathan over here also mentioned that due to internet lags and also spikes, the Path of Exile 2 game will have a server-side pause feature, which allows you to pause the game if you have a ping over 100 ms. And what that means is the server side will pause the game for you so that you won't die in the game, and this is to help you because the game is quite punishing when you die in the game, especially against bosses on late game maps. Now, one of the questions Zizaran was asking is that will we be able to support racing players or maybe having a battle pass in the future so that the company GGG is actually profitable? Jonathan answered that it is something that we can consider, and they have considered something like paying some points to join a race, and the reward can be cosmetics and also skins, but those are not implemented at this moment. And following from this, we do have a question about reserving player names and how a name is preserved in Path of Exile 2. Now at the moment, it is same as Path of Exile 1. Player names are separate in Path of Exile 1 and also Path of Exile 2, so you cannot reserve your name in Path of Exile 1 for Path of Exile 2 names. And it is a race to get your name before someone else takes it, which could be interesting. Now our next few questions is related to ruins. So with ruins, one of the questions Zizaran had is that can we override ruins by replacing the existing ones with another one? The answer is that even though this is a good idea, and Jonathan will speak to the other developers, at the moment you cannot override ruins. So once you place a ruin into the gears, that's pretty much final, and this is something you want to be aware of. The resistance we gain from the ruins for the socketing will help us greatly in the early game, and this will be less effective compared to FXs and also stats on the gears after as we get to the mid game and also late game. In the late game, we're looking for soul cores, which are coming from the league mechanics to give us more stats and also more effect and also more bonuses compared to ruins. So the ruins are rather designed towards more of the early game, which will give us a sizable stat boost in terms of defensive and also offensive stats. To follow up from the question from the ruins, how rare are the ruins in Path of Exile 2? So the answer is that ruins are not super rare, but soul cores can be quite rare in the game, and some of those might have rarity like the Divine Orbs in Path of Exile 1. Now over here we have a number of combat questions. The first question is an element stack, and how does it work? So the example given by Jonathan is that let's say if you're stacking poison and you have different ways of applying different poisons to the enemies, and maybe your class can do 2 instances of poison damage even though you're stacking multiple instances of waves of poisons. The 2 highest damage numbers from the ticks of the poisons will be active poison counters, and during this time, when one of the highest damage of the counters with poison kind of fades away, then the next largest ticks of poison will come in. So you'll have 2 of the largest tickers of poison while you have the element of poison, and this can depend on your class, and also different items might manipulate this. Now the next question is about mana, elemental, and also spell lich. So can we have mana lich in the game, and also how does elemental lich work? The short answer is yes, we will have elemental and also mana lich, but the developers has purposely made it harder and also try to avoid allowing mana lich with spells, which will kind of break the game. And following from this, we do have question about critical hits. So the first question is, are we stacking a lot of critical chances like Path of Exile 1? So the developer here want to make the game in such a way that to stack 100% critical rate, it can be a less optimal thing to do so, because you'll be sacrificing stats, and it's not expected players will get to 100% critical chance unless it's a very well thought and also tweaked build. The second question is, will other builds be as good as the critical build in Path of Exile 1? Because that seems to be the major build. So the developers are trying to avoid that critical build is the main build, and they also allow for variety of build that can be possible and can be good without critical FXs. But that said, after testing, they have realized that having some really good high rolls in the pool, like critical damage rolls can still be good for weapons to be exciting. So yes, there will be build variant that allows for no critical builds, but at the same time, having critical FXs are still very good on your weapons. Now, as we follow on with the FX questions, we do have the next question about the game designs with certain bad FXs. Some Path of Exile 1 players have looked into Life Region and also Thorns as not as preferable compared to most of the other FXs. So the answer over here from Jonathan is that some of the endgame tier 5 mods, which are extremely rare, will have some of those bad and also early game mods removed, like the Light Radius, which most players don't really need. So if you were to get a super rare tier 5 mod, you are likely going to get one of the good FXs. But the bad FXs can still exist in other mods, maybe it's tier 3 or tier 2, those can still exist. Now over here we have a few questions about will enemy crit and will the boss skills crit and how will this work? Will this crit for the whole ability or just projectiles? Now at the moment, from what Jonathan says, this depends on the designer and how they have scaled the abilities for the bosses and also monsters. So the intention is to allow for critical rolls on the skill, and it is situational, depends on the monsters for this to happen. And to follow from this, Zizaran offered a suggestion to have a visual warning for bosses before the big spell crits, like the big shaper crits coming with different colors and also animations. Which Jonathan responded that this is a good recommendation, that likely in the future we might see different color variant to warn players before the boss is about to one-shot you with a crit with a skill. Now the next question is, do we have charges for monsters? And the short answer is, we do not have charges for monsters in Path of Exile 2. Now as we keep going, we have some supporting character building questions. So the first one is, will supporting characters like Path of Exile 1, which you can roll Aura Bot, which you reserve all of your mana and you just walk around giving everyone buffs and also damage boost. So the developers in Path of Exile 2 are trying to avoid this, and the supporting roles and also characters in your party is aimed to provide active buff and also providing, reduce armor and also weakening enemies and also enable their team, or maybe setting up a particular skill trigger. So this will be a more active form of a supporting character compared to the 100% AFK supporting Aura Bot in Path of Exile 1. Now we did revisit one of the questions about respecting ascendancies. At the moment, this is on the developers' minds to discuss, but there's no changes about the ascendancy. They are still locked and you cannot change ascendancy within your same class. Now as we go through the questions, some of the questions will be related to mapping and also juicing up certain maps in the late game with Atlas. Now one of the first questions is about the reward coming from the mod and also rarity of the crafted maps. So here with Path of Exile 1 players, they have noticed that there is different reward for different difficulty modifier for the monsters. One of the example was, will there be the same reward for having penetration versus monster rarity with a mod for the map? So the answer is, this is a little different to Path of Exile 2. Some of the harder mod will provide you with more Waystorms, which are the map drops with a rate increase, but this is not as massive as Path of Exile 1. So most of the reward coming from the Waystorms are in the prefix mods compared to before. Now over here we do have a few of the questions related to letters and also API and also global announcement for players. To shortly summarize, we can still use /letter in Path of Exile 2. And in terms of the API possibilities for showing, who is the first to clear the bosses, this is possible in the future to be added. And in terms of the announcement for the first players to level up or the first player to do some things, the developers want to make it so it's not overwhelming to new players. And in the early levels, every 5 level, whoever is the fastest will get an announcement. After level 65, we might see an announcement per level for the players racing to be the service fastest player to get to level 100. But at the same time, they try to not overwhelm new players because there can be too many announcements. Now, knowing that we can respect our skills with gold, one of the questions is gold is the only respecting source for changing your talent tree? And the answer is yes, you only need gold for respecting. The next question is, will we get a free respec change if there is a massive nerf or change to the game or the skill trees? And the answer from Jonathan is that yes, if we get a massive nerf or change, players will get a free respec. But knowing this is more towards a global change to all the players. If this is a pinpoint nerf for a certain class and also certain abilities, this might not provide a free respec. So players should use their gold sparingly and also keep some gold in case of changes and also nerfs. Now over here we also have a few questions regarding to Ascendancy and also skills coming from Ascendancy and also items. Now Zizaran asks whether the skills coming from Ascendancy and also skill items that provide a skill, can have sockets and also be supported with gems. The short answer is yes. While you have skills coming up from Ascendancy, the number of sockets you can socket for those skills for supporting gems is depending on your character level. And once you get beyond level 80 with characters, you may be getting 5 sockets to support those Ascendancy skills. And in terms of items, the item level of the item will determine how many sockets of the free spells you get from items will have how many sockets. And with high item level, this will give you more sockets. But this is to be determined and we'll look into the threshold for this in the future. Now we do have some questions about Ascendancy again, and this is when will Ascendancy be revealed and will this be revealed before the launch? So Jonathan said this is not available on the website yet, but it is possible they might have some content creators posting those early for players to prepare. Now in terms of the low life threshold for Path of Exile 2, this is different from Path of Exile 1, which used to be 50% with POE 1, and with POE 2, this is 35% for the low life threshold, which can affect certain build. Now Jonathan have mentioned that the force move and also work keybind function is same as Path of Exile 1. And in terms of mapping for the towers and also Atlas maps mechanics, there's something very important which you guys should know. And if you guys are not sure, better watch this part of the video. So here we're talking about the lighting up of the towers, which you can use tablets of certain league mechanics to allow you to have a bonus and also to get more tablets and also to get more mechanics you liked, like the Delirium or maybe other mechanics, and those can overlap. But one of the biggest takeaway you should notice is the towers that light up can only be used once. Jonathan mentioned that they don't want this to be too grandy and they think it's a good setup at this moment and they want to see how this will interact with players. So be careful guys, if you're lighting up multiple towers to get a big overlapping buffs for your maps around the area, you can only use this once, and this is what the developers have said. Now he did mention that the radius of this light up radius can be a little wider compared to what we expected, but only having this to use once means that we should be using this one carefully and only when we know what we're doing. Maybe you can use this more quickly if they're not overlapping, but for the overlapping ones, you might want to save those. Now over here we do have a variety of different questions which I'll try to go through them a little quicker. So why is PoE 2 harder than PoE 1? The intention from the developers is to provide us with a good combat. And in terms of stacking Tailwind and also Rapid Fire with the Ranger class, it is doable, but some designers may want to change this. Now one of the questions is about Jonathan. What makes him motivated and what keeps him going? For him, he wants to make a game that he's happy with. And even with Path of Exile 1, he feels like there is a lot to improve for the game. Now in terms of the softcore and also hardcore migration of the characters, if you die playing a hardcore character, you will come back into the softcore, so you don't lose your character, permanently. Now in terms of the confidence with the beta launch, well, Jonathan is not too confident because there can be a lot of issues and we can get a massive day one hype, and he's not sure how the consoles will work. And in terms of the concurrent players, how prepared are we for Path of Exile 2? Well, Jonathan said we're prepared for at least 1 million players or even higher as they build towards more servers and also prepare for more players. Now currently, there's no Exile count planned for 2025. This is planned maybe around 2026. Now coming back to one of the combat questions towards the game. So we had a look at some of the teasers from the Path of Exile 2, and for bosses, we will be getting 6 portals or 1 portals, especially for the pinnacle bosses. The short answer is we're only allowed 1 attempt of those harder bosses, pinnacle bosses. And yes, if you die once, it's over for now. They want to make it challenging and they want the players to do it in one go. So be aware of this guys, the endgame can be quite difficult. Now, in terms of targeting and also tailoring in-game for safer content or content that with more variety for different play options, Jonathan mentioned that having mods on the maps allow us to choose different maps and also not having bosses in the regular maps, but having individual maps for bosses is allowing the players to have more options to play the content they want. So for players that want to play safer content, they can then try to not mod or choose the map too much at the start of the game. Now, one of the questions Zizaran asks is to having players to come and also help him with a difficult boss fight. Maybe during the halfway he opened a very expensive map and he can't beat it. Can he pause the game and ask for a friend to come and help him out? The answer from the developer is that during the pause of the game, you can't accept players to come into your game. But after you unpause the game, they can join you. So yes, you can pause the game, ask for help, and then once they're ready to join, you unpause the game. But for certain bosses, even if you have the portal outside of the boss room, if you cannot enter the boss room, well, they can't help you. So the short answer is, you can get help for the story camping boss, but there are certain bosses you might not get help from. And this is again, it is possible we have exploits and also things people will abuse on by pausing the game. Now, will we be getting fishing or other minigames in the game? Well, the short answer is that at the moment we don't have any of that because we're focused on league mechanics, but we can look into this in the future because we now have boats in the game. Two-factor variation for the game? Well, the shorter answer is we're not having two-factor variation due to the difficulty with supporting policies if a player were to lose their two-factor variation device, and it's harder to prove them they're the owner of the game, and this can be a little difficult. One of the questions about the support gems with all the weapons and how this works with support gems. And the answer from the developer is that one support gem for the entire character that is allowed and also used. Now, during the interview, there are some ongoing concern with Path of Exile 1 that is still not fixed yet, including loading assets and some of the assets being invisible. And here we do have the big question, the pre-download of the game. Because we have the latest news, I'll direct you guys to this particular official news page. And as we keep going with the questions, one of the next questions is, will player and also map rarity stack? And also, are they addictive or multiplicative? Player rarity will be multiplicative with map rarity. So having more player rarity on your items is a big bonus to find some rare items in the game. Now, in terms of the future league inspirations, the developers have said they are taking notes from other games or even movies for some cool ideas to come in the future with Path of Exile 2. Now, in terms of having more features and also different engines for Path of Exile 1 with Path of Exile 2, the developer has said that during the development of Path of Exile 2, we're still using the POE 1 engine. And there are some changes though. We're getting better lighting and also nicer areas because of the additional changes in POE 2. So coming over to some more important question for the guild. One of the questions is, we're not getting guild stashes, and because guild itself is not transferred from Path of Exile 1 to Path of Exile 2. And Jonathan did mention that yes, regrettably, it is not integrated with a guild, and due to this not being integrated, players will have to purchase guild stash again, and also guild expansion spaces, and also special guild tabs. And this is a little unfortunate, but due to tactical issues, this is not transferred. And of course, we have a question. Are we having Path of Exile mobile, and are the developers working on this? The short answer is they're currently putting this on hold, so they have all the resources for POE 2. And finally, the last question is that can you mute player sound in the town? Because there are some really annoying ones. And Jonathan said he will speak to the team about this for Zizaran because he was really annoyed of some of the goblin sounds. Now, hopefully this is not too long for you guys, and it take me hours to make the summary. So the original video is about 1 hour and also 40 minutes. I try to cut down a little bit, and in the future, I'll provide you guys with more news digests related to POE 2 and try to make it as short as I can while digesting all the information for you guys. Now, before we finish, if you guys haven't subscribed, this is a really good time to do so because I'll be looking into the latest Path of Exile 2 news on different communities and also on our official forum, official webpage. I'll also be looking into the best build for each of the class as the meta develops with the Chinese and also the English community. So stay tuned for the latest update and also guides for Path of Exile 2. And of course, this is going to be a big month for us. and I'll try to bring you guys all of the latest content and also guides for Path of Exile 2 to come.